Let's talk Fresh Prince. I'm going to read a comment from the GOAT, Quincy Jones, obviously, who EP'd that and picked Will and all the rest of that stuff. He says, I think Fresh Prince and the success of the show. Is that a? Did I hear myself?
You're good. Keep going.
Oh, no, I think those are the voices in your head.
Yeah. I'm about to say, am I tripping? Man, I got scared for a minute. He says, I think Fresh Prince and the success of the show was the final piece that cemented hip hop into the pop culture lexicon. We know the rapper Murs, who also was speaking on this, brought up that he said it brought hip hop into homes around the world in a form that was authentic and yet palatable. He said it showed millions and millions that were unfamiliar with the culture, and not all rappers were violent, ignorant, and unintelligent. So if you go back to the 90s and we think about the popularity of that show, do we agree with that? And also, is there something that we're missing in terms of hip hop crossing over to the pop culture? Because I actually agree with this from a shoe standpoint,
kinda,
music standpoint. Will Smith getting the first Grammy being hip hop with Jazzy Jeff. I actually agree with this, but is there anything that's missing? Yeah, you're saying kinda.
I mean, he wasn't a rapper on the show. He was just a kid from Philly.
Yeah, but him being a rapper brought people to the show.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Not necessarily, because a lot of people probably watched. Well, before Fresh Prince, you had was Martin out before Fresh Prince?
No.
Okay,
nope.
So I can't say that. But
that's another show.
If we're talking about Jordans and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure Theo had Jordans on in the Cosby Show. Different world.
I don't know about that.
Different world.
No, but if you want to talk about, because Dwayne Wayne always had Jordans.
He always had Jordans on. And if anything introduced you to the culture, hip hop or black, whatever, that would be the first. In my personal opinion, would be Different World.
Will being a rapper is the part that
rappers were on Different World.
But are we talking about introducing hip hop to the mainstream, including white people? Or are we talking about introducing it to the mainstream? Because
pop culture,
what white people consume is not the same as
there
what black
people
consume. You said A Different World. I've never seen A Different World.
People could have watched Fresh Prince and still not knowing that he was a rapper.
Yeah, I mean, I knew he was a rapper, but I feel like the Fresh Prince was bigger, and it could also be my age too, because I remember when it came out.
When I hear pop culture lexicon, I'm thinking what you're talking about. I'm talking about everything.
Yeah.
That's the way I took it when I heard that.
Crossed over. I take it as introduced hip hop culture to white America is kind of what
that. But for real though, like I'm thinking,
man. Different World was on prime time on a Thursday night right before Cheers.
Yeah, but the only thing is with him, I know he wasn't a rapper. I know he wasn't a rapper on the show. And Jay Moore, I know you can attest. We all grew up on it. He wasn't a rapper on the show, but I knew Will Smith was associated with hip hop.
You knew Will
when
Smith
he was on the show.
Associated with hip hop.
I think more people than you giving it credit for actually knew that Will was a rapper, and that show was going to it popped off. To me, it popped off hip hop, the shoes, the fashion. I think it's all of that. To me, that's the way I watched it. And I feel you on Different World because Dwayne Wayne shoes and Ron's shoes, they was laced. I get that part. But the hip hop part to pop culture, I think I agree, man.
No, I don't agree at all.
I agree.
I don't agree at all, because if we're going to give anybody credit for that, give it to Run DMC when they were on with Aerosmith. Then talk about the Beastie Boys when they sold 10 million records. You know, if we're going to talk about mainstreaming hip hop and hip hop culture to where, and I was there in the suburbs with those white kids. And them finding out, and because that's who was buying that's always who's bought all the records anyway. That's always who's been the main consumer of this culture. You can get mad at me if you want to, but
so you think Run DMC because they crossed over hip hop over to pop culture?
Yes, because you know what, those stadiums were full, and it wasn't just black kids. You can't fill up a 20,000 seat stadium
with just
black kids. You know, and so if anything, when it's always been small incremental things. When Run DMC hit with Walk This Way, and all of a sudden, oh, you see that on MTV all the time. Then here comes the Beastie Boys, and they're touring with Run DMC, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, that's when you can get these network executives who aren't cool at all to say, hip hop. Hey, Quincy Jones, do you know anybody? And then Quincy Jones can get a show like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air greenlit based on the successes that had come before. Now, don't get me wrong, it took it to the next level, but part of the reason that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air worked is because it was a funny show.
Great writing.
And there would be kind of like if you watch the episodes of The Cosby Show, they would have Bill Cosby would have on the HBCU shirts. There would be black art in the households. Okay, that was the first step. And some of those same steps were used in,
Will rocked them joints too.
So when you would see Will, we allude to him wearing the Jordans, he'd have on the Black College Alliance sweatshirts. He would talk. You see him and he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go pick up that new Nas CD," or there'd be an Intelligent Hoodlum poster on the wall in his room. Those are those nods to hip hop. But once again, the show worked. I want to, as much as it was a show that had a hip hop influence, it worked partially built on those things that had come before, but it also worked in a way in spite of hip hop. It was because Will actually was such a talented individual, and the actors they surrounded him with were James Avery was such a good actor as Uncle Phil. The first and second, of course, I like the first Aunt Viv better. The fact that Alfonso Ribeiro, somebody who had been a star since the early
Jackson
1980s,
Silver Spoons.
True.
It's so there are a lot of factors, and the thing is, I always hate that thing where they say, "Oh well, it showed that rappers weren't ignorant or violent." I was like, you got to remember what 1989, because that's when you start the production of a show going into 90 when the show finally debuted. You got to realize that, the whole idea of gangster rap and rap that's more violent and more edgy being mainstream was still very new. The rappers who were popping, it was still trying to make you dance and have a good time. There wasn't this crazy, you had NWA, but then you had not Criss Cross, but the beta test for Criss Cross, Kid and Play. You had the people who were selling records, even LL Cool J, he might have been edgy. If you saw him, he seemed like he was very aggressive at 35 years old, but he was just making stuff to make you have a good time. So I kind of resent when people say, "Oh, it showed that the culture wasn't just violent and ignorant." Like if you are of the culture, you never thought the culture was violent or ignorant.
But that's not. But to your point, who are we showing this to? We're showing it to white America, right?
True.
And
so
go ahead, Lone. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think Jay makes some good points. I actually I would probably say, just from my own personal experience, I would probably say that the Aerosmith Run DMC thing was probably huge.
It was
like monster, like monumental, like that type of crossover at that time because of how big Aerosmith was.
No, but
I'm not mad at that.
But this is the thing. Let's clear this up because literally Run DMC saved Aerosmith from being. They were nobodies. Like they weren't a part of that hair metal thing that was happening at the time. Like Steven Tyler says this. Like they'll say that song saved our career. Because
that's dope if he said that.
Dude
that's
looks
dope.
like a lady and all
dope.
that came after.
Definitely.
Right.
That's
when
dope.
The resurgence of Aerosmith has to do with, up until that point, Aerosmith had probably never been on MTV.
Because Walk This Way was pretty much a redo.
Yeah, it was a redo of the song off of Toys in the Attic from the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I respect that if he said that. That's dope.
No, and like if you go back and you do your Googles, like Aerosmith had not been a mainstay on MTV. Run DMC was bigger on MTV than Aerosmith was.
Right, but again,
once again, you
the
put
argument
them up there
is
with white people, and it always make it seem
exactly.
bigger.
We're talking about white America in this. Well, at least I am in this particular way. And Aerosmith had at that point been out for over a decade.
Yeah.
Right.
So they had like even if they were kind of falling off, this known rock band, even if they didn't fit in with the 80s or whatever, combining with this was just something new and different.
True.
It was new and different. We hadn't really seen. I mean, I remember it specifically, and I was like, what, 7 or 8 or something? Do you know what I mean? So, it was big. I feel like to the other point, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I feel like that just took everything to another level.
Yeah.
Well, it's okay. So it goes back to the example when we talk about the concert, right? The 20,000 and in the stadium, and you can't feel that with just all black folks, right? We obviously that's going to be a diverse crowd, right? But you're talking about millions upon millions of eyes on a TV show nightly. Like, to me, that audience is huge.
I still don't feel like that, though, man. I mean, it was huge.
I-
Fresh Prince came on Monday nights.
Mhm.
Yeah, I watched it.
That's not a huge night. Now it was
It
probably
was
the
when
best show
Yeah.
on Monday night, but with it being a so-called hip hop show, there's not a whole lot of hip hop esque moments on the show, other than him dressing the part.
But I think that
essentially.
subtlety is why.
Yeah, and then having 𝐀𝐿𝐴
That all of that goes into the equation,
It
though.
does.
The fact that they actually are a hip hop group coming off a Grammy.
but I just can't attribute Fresh Prince being the springboard for all of that. I just can't.
I again, I'm just going to say this again from a white perspective because you guys don't have this. It's just, it's just
No,
what
he's
we
right.
sure
right.
don't. Yeah,
it's
we
just this is what it is. Like,
yeah.
there's certain things that are palatable for white America.
Mm-hmm.
The way that show was presented was palatable for white America to where you're not getting a whole, it's like, oh, these are quote unquote, these are good black people.
Right.
We just
Right.
talked about that conversation, right? It's
Right.
palatable. And so what happens to the kids that are allowed to watch the show, right? For whatever reason, or that aren't allowed to listen to hip hop music, you know what I mean? And so then they dig in to see like, who is Will Smith? Oh, the Fresh Prince. Oh, who's this guy that randomly makes cameos, the DJ, 𝐀𝐿𝐴, and all this other stuff. So I feel like from that perspective, it's super huge. Like the show is massive from that aspect. I don't think if you're already a part of the culture, or you're already aware of everything, it probably didn't have as much of an impact.
Did it make you want to listen to rap music?
It could have only
You
because
personally, though.
because me, I honestly,
I was already listening to it.
I couldn't even tell you.
oh, you talk? Yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't know. I couldn't even tell you. I don't remember what I was doing when I was 9 and 10. You know what I mean? Like I don't remember anything. But what I'm saying is like I grew up in Anderson, Indiana. Sure, it wasn't just all white people, but it is kind of rural. It's a small city in Indiana. And so as far as like cultural related things, there's not a lot going on in the town. So you're not introduced to a lot. Even the schools we're at it's just this is what it is. And so to see something like that that's so different, it's just different. It's a cultural experience that you're not used to. And so when you witness that as a young kid and you're like, oh, what is this? You may not even pick up on the subtleties that you're talking about. You're just like, oh, this is a interesting family in Bel-Air. Like, it's like,
Right. Different World's one of my favorite shows. So I understand exactly
I
what you're
almost
saying.
wore a Different World shirt today, too.
Bruh, I know exactly what you're saying. Like I remember being hype about the shoes. I remember the episode
Even down to
where,
Dwayne Wayne's glasses. They used
yes.
to draw Bart Simpson pictures
With those on
Dwayne
it.
Wayne glasses on.
I remember the joint
I
where
wanted those glasses.
Yeah.
I found them at
I couldn't tell you if the show came on. That it's what it is.
I
I've never
found them
seen an
joints
episode.
at Washington Square.
Yeah.
Begged my mama to cop them. Walked around the mall with them flipped up. I thought I was that guy. I remember the Heavy D. I think Heavy D was on.
Heavy D was on there.
Yeah.
Heavy D was on that
Tupac
episode.
was on
Tupac
there.
was on there.
That was in the final season.
Yeah. So Terry, believe
Is
me,
that
I'm
the-
with you. I'm
is that
just
the show that Jada Pinkett was on too?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So hip hop definitely, the culture was definitely represented on that show. I'm not mad at that. I'm just saying, man, Will and them.
The HBCU experience was that show itself made people when I was coming up with want to go to college.
True.
Essentially springboarded a whole nation full of kids that wanted to go to college, whether it had been an HBCU or predominantly white college. It just made you want to excel and kind of be like those characters and still be you, remain yourself, because I mean that was a good representation.
That's how I was introduced to
culture.
HBCUs, was that show.
I know it's considered a little bit sillier than the Cosby Show.
Yeah.
But there are times where they went there where the Cosby Show did not.
Agreed.
About when the Will and Carlton were driving. They
got pulled over.
They were driving a Benz too slow when they got pulled over.
Yep.
And things like that. And where the things that were going on in the world
The Fresh
were
Prince
actually addressed.
The Fresh Prince had hella meat and potatoes.
Like
be
as
clear.
much as I love the Cosby Show, there are some times they just did not go there. But at that same time, that's why we love the Cosby Show, because it didn't make it a point to go there, but it did give us different
World
things.
definitely went there.
True.
Yeah, after the first season, I tried
true.
the first season of Different World.
The first season was different.
Yeah.
Literally, it
That was the
different in everything.
Denise season,
because
right?
as long as Denise was the main character, and I know
Yeah.
we digging into a deep hole now.
Right.
There was because this is the thing about Different World. Like every time like someone got drunk, it had to be like a very special episode, or like if somebody had sex, they might have gotten pregnant. Like it was never like,
True.
oh yeah, this is actually how. I mean, it was still very light, but I understand it was network TV in the 1980s.
Or had those AIDS.
You know, yeah, you couldn't make it seem like it was just fun to have sex and drink in college, like it actually
What are you
was.
promoting?
Huh?
Hey, more? What you trying to promote?
Fun.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like you know, I will give props to because the show Grownish, because it's very honest about the fact that like from freshman year to senior year, kids are drinking and hooking up and making poor decisions.
Are we talking about high school or college?
College,
because
college.
you can probably damn near say both.
I mean, that's what in that
If
what
you want to
Euphoria
keep
is
it all the
about.
way
Yeah.
real.
That is exactly what Euphoria is
Yeah,
about.
so-
They need to hurry up with the next season, by the way,
So-
too. All right, man. Well, good conversation. You know, we agree to disagree, but
And Mike added some stuff into the chat here. He said to Quincy's point in his quote, he said Fresh Prince was the final catalyst that
Yes.
put hip hop into the mainstream.
No.
See that?
He
See,
never
final. Remember, Hammer came along a little bit after that and sold
Hammer's
like
mentioned
12
in his
million,
Hammer's
12 million
mentioned in his
records.
article too.
Yeah,
He's mentioned in his
so-
article. Yep.
Because like I know a lot of people they say what you will about Hammer, but there's somebody who loves Jay Dilla now, but their first rap tape was Please Hammer.
No,
Don't Hurt 'Em.
absolutely. I knew people in school that knew nothing about hip hop, rap, nothing until Can't Touch This came out.